0224 hours, January 19th, 1991, southern Iraq. Colonel Sergei Ivanov leaned over the radar console, lit only by the soft green glow of the P-18 scope. The sweep arm ticked forward. Steady. Routine. Then, a cluster appeared 5 contacts, high speed, approaching from the southwest, vector 230, range 90 kilometers, possible F-15 package, a technician called out. Ivanov nodded. Procedure initiated. Tracking passed to the SNR-75, fire control radars locked. Engagement grid primed, then silence. 2411, the first blip faded. 022413, the second glitched, then vanished. 022415, the last 3 disappeared mid-sweep. 022417, entire contact cluster gone. No jamming tones, no strobe interference, no Doppler shift, just absence. Operators recalibrated, recycled frequency bands, checked alternate arrays. The sky was empty, no contrails, no impact, no noise, nothing on UHF, VHF, or SHF. Did they change heading, someone asked. Ivanov shook his head. No turns, no dropouts, no exit vectors. The aircraft had simply stopped existing. Credential data logs confirmed it 5 radar-confirmed returns. Multiple band lock. Then null. He cross-checked with Iraqi visual spotters. No sightings. He called command. We had them. Then we didn't. The reply was curt. Then you never had them. But they had. The air wasn't empty. It was hiding something. And that something had looked straight into Soviet radar and walked out unseen. Laird Marshal Nikolai Petrov, chief of the PVO. At best, they delay detection. They do not disappear. Petrov wasn't alone. Doctrine was built on electromagnetic truth, the laws of reflection, pulse, and return. Stealth was a budget-burning illusion. Quotes from official manuals. Disappearance is error, not tactic. If radar saw it once, it sees it again. Low visibility is not invisibility. Credential drop number 1, Petrov had commanded layered radar networks since the late 1960s. He oversaw Warsaw Pact integration. His word shaped what Soviet officers believed continuity of detection, battlefield control. Systems were layered VHF for long-range early warning, UHF for vector tracking, SHF for fire control precision. They trained to expect jamming. They rehearsed through saturation, but disappearance. No protocol existed for contacts that vanished mid-sweep. There is no such tactic. An instructor scoffed. That's science fiction. So they dismissed gaps as glitches. They taught radar to see, never to interpret silence. Soviet command feared the known. They never feared the absent. Until absence became a weapon. Soviet radar doctrine was not built around doubt. It was built around continuity. The Integrated Air Defense System, IADS, depended on tracking persistence. Once a contact appeared, it was considered real. If the track dropped, the cause was assumed to be either mechanical fault, operator error, or hostile electronic warfare. But it was never assumed that the aircraft had simply vanished. Doctrine flow. Initial detection, handoff to tracking radar. Tracking radar, continuous vector confirmation. Fire control radar, weapon lock. Each layer reinforced the previous. If one dropped the signal, another picked it up. This overlap was the foundation of Soviet confidence. Credential drop number 2. Dr. Alexei Korovin, lead radar integration theorist. No aircraft can survive across bands and remain unseen. One system always sees. The assumption was sound if the enemy played within the spectrum's rules. What wasn't considered aircraft that changed their signature mid-flight? That entered side lobe nulls deliberately. That used geometry to suppress return rather than reflect it. Radar was treated as a spotlight. If something entered the beam, it lit up. But America had built something different, a ghost in the beam. Soviet manuals emphasized return consistency. Once a blip appeared, its continued presence confirmed validity. Loss was chalked up to systemic fault, not enemy capability. The blind spot wasn't on the screen. It was in the doctrine itself. They didn't fear sudden silence because they thought silence could never be strategic. 0224 hours. Early warning P-14 radar detects 5 contacts heading northeast, 850 km H, altitude 6,000 meters, 2024-07. VHF and UHF bands confirm return. Operators log multiband lock. 022411 tracks transfer to fire control SNR 75 radars. Lock confirmed. Range closing. 022413 sweep resets. 1 contact fades. 022415 2 more disappear mid-track. 022417 remaining tracks stutter then vanish. 02419 radar scope shows clear. Grid silence, all systems green, no returns. Colonel Ivanov orders sweep replay. Raw data confirms 5 valid tracks, no Doppler drop, no jamming spike, no noise surge. 02424. Backup, S-band radar confirms the same returns lost. Sweep normal, no clutter. Operators begin manual scan, nothing, not even residual signature, no wake turbulence, no radar bloom. Credential drop, none 3. Later, GRU analysis showed synchronized dropout across 3 radars, each operating on different bands. Not interference, not decay, sudden, absolute absence. Ivanov stares at the logbook. Time-stamped, verified, witnessed, then gone. A junior operator whispers, maybe they weren't real. Ivanov replies, ghosts don't fly formation. They weren't echoes. They were aircraft. And they were seen. Then they weren't. The radars didn't fail. The radars were defeated. Moscow received the report within hours. 5 confirmed radar returns. Multiple frequency bands. Lock acquired. All vanished within seconds. The reaction dismissal. Multi-path interference, said the first review officer. Atmospheric anomaly. Claimed the second. Synchronization dropout. Suggested a third. Command filtered the event through the lens of doctrine, not threat. Credential drop, Nerf 4, Colonel General Anatoly Smirnov, overseeing air defense operations, issued a formal review note. Loss of contact does not equate to enemy capability. Investigate local calibration error. Internal memos reflected a deeper fear they couldn't explain it, so they wouldn't accept it. Ivanov's report was annotated heavily. Sections referencing immediate disappearance and multi-band loss were crossed out and replaced with operator lost track during sweep cycle. A second memo ordered radar crews to recertify range gate settings, fire control systems to adjust for signal latency, band switching drills to resume immediately. They blamed the gear. They blamed the crew. They never blamed the blip. To acknowledge the possibility that American aircraft could appear, then vanish without jamming, without speed, without deception, would be to admit a doctrinal void. So they labeled the incident non-repeatable. But Ivanov had seen it. So had 3 other radar officers. This wasn't a glitch, it was a method. And somewhere in the silence that followed, Soviet command sensed it. The enemy wasn't hiding. The enemy had become optional, visible only when it chose. To explain the vanishing aircraft, Soviet engineers offered the first technical theory, radar double returns. According to this explanation, nearby AWACS platforms or other airborne emitters might have caused temporary false positives, ghost contacts from signal bounce, or harmonic misidentification. The answer, filter adjustments, pulse deconfliction, narrow beam rejection. Command issued directives, adjust P-18 and P-14 sweep harmonics. Isolate cross-radar interference bands. Implement new return discrimination thresholds. Training manuals were updated. New exercises were run. Operators drilled on identifying phantom echoes. They were taught to recognize what wasn't real. Quotes from the updated manual echo tracks decay within 2-3 sweeps. True contacts maintain signature geometry. Don't chase ghosts, verify before vector. Credential drop. In one training session, Instructors use footage from the very vanishing incident without telling crews it had been real. The implication, these weren't threats, just illusions. But something didn't fit. Those contacts had held for 4 full sweeps. They matched fighter velocities. They approached at tactical altitudes. This wasn't signal bounce. It was behavior. Behavior that mimicked a strike and then unplugged itself. Engineers assured command. No aircraft can remove its signature mid-flight. They were wrong, because the Americans hadn't added deception. They had removed presence. When the echo theory collapsed, Soviet analysts pivoted to a second idea: deception via false contacts. Maybe the Americans were injecting phantom signals, false blips to simulate fighter formations. Not real aircraft, just electronic ghosts. It sounded sophisticated, plausible, reassuring, because if it was a trick, the system could adjust. Command issued a countermeasure directive. Increase confirmation interval before threat designation. Require dual-band validation for target lock. Emphasize operator skepticism during single-pass contacts. Simulators were programmed to flash brief, false returns training crews to resist overreaction. Credential drop in an internal memo. Air Defense Section. Chief wrote, "Apparitions are a Western trick. Discipline is the antidote." But the vanishing contacts weren't behaving like false blips. They didn't flicker. They didn't warp. They entered the grid like real aircraft. They moved with coordinated spacing. They followed expected strike vectors. Then they simply vanished. Operators protested. These weren't ghosts. One wrote, "They followed doctrine hours." Still, the official stance held. It was easier to believe in American trickery than in American invisibility. Internal divisions formed. Radar officers believed it was a new aircraft signature. Electronic warfare theorists insisted on spoofing. Command said nothing because they didn't know what to say. They thought they were being fooled, but they weren't looking at lies. They were staring at a capability they couldn't name. And when a threat has no name, no explanation, it becomes something far more dangerous. It becomes real. Operation Phantom Trace began in late January 1991. The GRU deployed emergency collection units to multiple radar sectors. Their mission: isolate and decode the vanishing aircraft phenomenon. Every radar log was pulled, every frequency sweep analyzed. Teams mapped incident timelines across VHF, UHF, and SHF bands. Initial finding: no consistent signal trail, no strobe noise, no carrier suppression, just presence, then absence. They expected telltale jamming fingerprints. What they found instead were voids. Credential drop: Marfiv Ltopwerdu Kohli, Vasily Morozov, GRU electronic warfare analyst. There is no suppression, no flood, no interference, only a gap shaped like an aircraft. They cross-referenced with Iraqi Air Force reports: nothing. No visual confirmation, no radar persistence. They checked satellite data, no visible contrails. They intercepted American transmissions, no record of an airstrike in the region. And yet, Soviet radars had seen something, tracked something, and lost everything. Analysts began considering the impossible stealth aircraft using non-reflective geometry, low-emission profiles, and angle-optimized flight paths. But even that didn't explain how the contacts had entered detection and then simply disengaged from it. It wasn't jamming. It wasn't spoofing. It was detection management on the enemy's terms. One GRU officer called it active disappearance. Another used a darker phrase: they control when we see them. That means they control what we believe. The enemy had found a new kind of weapon: selective visibility. And the Soviet system wasn't blind. It was being guided towards silence. The Americans didn't just avoid detection. They mastered the art of vanishing. Technology 1 F-117 Nighthawk faceted. Stealth design scattered radar signals in all directions except back. Radar cross-section reduced to that of a bird. Soviet expectation small means slow, vulnerable. American reality small means invisible. Combat example F-117s flew directly into radar nets, struck targets, and left unseen. Technology 2 radar absorbent material RAM coated aircraft skin with materials that absorbed radar energy instead of reflecting it. Reduced signal strength below radar detection threshold. Soviet expectation, all metal reflects. American reality, some surfaces disappear. Result contacts faded mid-sweep like shadows dissolving. Technology 3 MCON emission control U, S aircraft flew radio silent. No transponders, no active radar. Even AWACS comms routed through satellite relays. Soviet expectation, all aircraft chatter. American reality silence was strategic. Result, no signals to intercept, nothing to triangulate. Technology 4 stealth geometry, plus flight profile. Flight paths exploited radar blind zones and side lobe nulls. Aircraft banked into angles where radar return dropped below threshold. Soviet expectation linear paths, consistent returns. American reality vanishing via angles. Result aircraft appeared briefly, then vanished without warning. Technology 5 synthetic aperture decoys plus AWACS masking. AWACS created radar illusions. Phantom blips with motion vectors. Real aircraft used those paths as cover. Soviet expectation, every blip is a jet. American reality, every blip is a choice. Result operators fired at shadows missed the real threat entirely. Credential drop SMR 6. A USAF stealth pilot debriefed post-war. They weren't blind. We just made sure they were only looking where we weren't. The Americans had done something Moscow couldn't imagine. Weaponized disappearance. They hadn't dodged the Soviet radar net. They had slipped through its logic. 024 hours, January 19, 1991, Sector Delta 3, southern Iraq. 5 contacts appeared. Radars locked. Fighters scrambled. 02411, tracking confirmed on 3 systems. 02413, SNR 125, radar lost contact. 02415, P18, scope cleared. Operator stared. 02417, nothing. No returns. No jamming tones. No decoys. 2419, SA6, battery requested visual recon. 2425, spotter saw nothing. 2500, airspace declared clear. Result 5, radar tracks. 3 frequency bands. 0 visual confirmations. 2 missiles launched. 0 enemy aircraft identified. Another site. Sector Echo 4, 40 kilometer away, identical sequence. Operators watched contacts materialize, then erase. Credentialed battle summary. All systems nominal. No false tracks. No malfunctions. Threat vanished. Battle score 2, radar sites engaged. 8 total contacts observed. 6 total radar systems activated. 0 engagements. 0 survival data collected. It wasn't a failed engagement. It was a non-engagement engineered by the enemy. Reversal lines. They called radar truth. It showed them a lie they called disappearance error. It was doctrine. The system didn't miss. The system obeyed rules that the Americans had already broken. And when the radar scopes cleared, the silence wasn't peace. It was proof that the battlefield had already changed, and Moscow hadn't seen it happen. When the post-strike reports reached Moscow, Soviet planners faced a disturbing reality. There was no debris, no engagement logs, no jamming records, no visual sightings. Just radar returns that came and went. The pattern repeated too often, across too many sectors, to be dismissed. And so, Command assembled the Internal Review Board not to investigate what had gone wrong, but to understand what had been violated. Revelation 1. Presence is not persistence. Soviet doctrine assumed that once an object appeared on radar, it would remain visible unless actively concealed. But the Americans used aircraft that didn't stay on radar. They dipped in, vanished, reappeared, or didn't. Quote paraphrased, "We assumed appearance meant vulnerability. It only meant a choice to be seen." Revelation 2, detection confirmation. The old belief confirmation came from redundancy, multiple radars, multiple bands. But the Americans bypassed that. They engineered absence across all layers. Soviet radars didn't disagree. They all agreed on nothing. Revelation 3. Silence, secure strategy. In Soviet doctrine, silence was passive. A quiet sky meant no threat. But in this war, silence became a signature. Credential Drop 1 radar theorists concluded they taught their aircraft not just to evade, but to vanish. Revelation 4. The system saw what it expected. And what it expected was continuity, persistence, and noise. The Americans brought angles, shadow, and choice. They weren't hiding. They were unreachable because they no longer played within the Soviet rules. To them, the radar screen was not a threat. It was a canvas. And what it painted was, you're looking in the right place, but we're not there. The radar scope blinked flatline green. No noise, no contacts, no anomalies, just empty sky, rendered in pixels and protocol. Operators stared, not in relief but in disbelief. A moment earlier, they had tracked 5 targets. Now, not even a ghost remained. The radar didn't fail. It obeyed. It performed as designed, and still, it had been outmaneuvered by silence. Below the console, the logbook lay open. The entry was short, 0224, 5 targets, lost contact. Nothing else, no shots, no trails, no returns. It was not an ambush, not a dogfight, not an engagement. It was a lesson. Not just about radar, not just about stealth, but about belief. The screen wasn't just a sensor. It was a mirror reflecting Soviet assumptions, and in that moment, it reflected nothing. That blank scope was not failure. It was proof. Proof that the battlefield had changed. That appearance could no longer be trusted. That absence could kill.